So we're going to do some problems solving by square root examples. So we already talked about the strategy. Now, solving by square root examples. First of all, let's look at a pretty straightforward one. Say we've got something like this. X squared equals 9. X squared equals 9. So we've got the x term, we've got a squared term, which is the x. We've got a number all by itself, so we can use the square root strategy. So we've got the squared term on one side, the number on the other. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root of both sides. We're going to put a plus or minus in front of the number side. And then just think, well, square root of x squared is x. Then we have plus or minus the square root of 9. And the square root of 9 is 3. So that means that x is equal to plus or minus 3. You might say, well, I know that because if you just gave me x squared is 9, I could probably tell you that 3 squared is 9. And hopefully can tell you that negative 3 squared is also 9. So you can tell just by observation that your options are 3 or negative 3. Okay, so that's why we put this plus or minus term right here, is because that helps us make sure that we capture both the positives part and the negative part. So that's the one part of this step that you don't want to forget that can maybe cause some problems. So just make sure that you remember to put the plus or minus in front of the square root on the number side and you'll be just fine, just fine. Okay, so let's try another example. A little bit more meat to this one. Try 3x squared minus 15 is equal to 0. Okay, so this one's not too bad. Remember, we've got a squared term, this thing. We've got something squared. We've got a number all by itself, and that's it. So we're good to go. So remember, we want to get the squared term on one side. So we got to move the 15 over. We got to add 15 to both sides. So 3x squared equals 15. And now remember, we want to isolate and destroy. Isolate and destroy. So we've got to get that x squared by himself. So he's almost by himself, but he's still got that little angry 3 to protect him. So we're going to divide both sides by 3. And now we've got x squared equals 5. Now this isn't too bad. Now the x squared's by himself. How do I get rid of an x squared? So I'll take the square root of it. So I take the square root of both sides and I'm going to stick my little plus or minus right in front. So now I've got x equals plus or minus the square root of 5. And honestly, that's my answer. I'm good to go. So your answers are square root of 5 and negative square root of 5. And it's super fantastic. All right? Try another one. Okay. Try 9x squared plus 25 equals 0. Okay? All right, we're going to do the same strategy. We're going to isolate and destroy. We've got a squared thing. We got a squared thing, and we got a number by itself. All right, we got something squared, and we got something else by itself. I get excited when I do math. All right, so we want to get the squared term by itself. So again, first step. Subtract my 25 off of both sides. So I've got 9x squared equals negative 25. And now I'm going to get the x squared by itself, so divide both sides by 9. Okay. Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides and put the plus or minus out front. So what I've got is x squared, or x, equals plus or minus the square root of negative 25 over 9. And this is where things can go horribly wrong. Because here's what you're going to do, probably, some stage you're going to go, oh my gosh, check it out, look, there's a negative sign here and a negative sign here, so I'm just going to cancel them out, and then everything's going to be all happy, and you're going to go on your merry way and do something absolutely tragic, okay? So don't do that. Remember, if you see a negative inside a square root sign, this negative has nothing to do with this negative. They are completely independent negatives. They have nothing in common. Whenever you see a negative inside the square root, the very, very first thing that you should do is change it, pull it out, and change it to an I. a square root negative, a negative sign inside a square root, you could pull that out, make it an I, and get rid of that negative number inside the square root. Okay, that's a very, very important strategy that you absolutely have to get comfortable with, okay? So now you're a lot less likely to do something completely ridiculous because you don't have extra negative signs floating around. The less negative signs we have in our problem, the better. So remember, now we have plus or minus I. Remember how that, or notice how the I is on this right side of the plus or minus, because it's not going to go out front. It's not going to go up here. It's going to go and stay inside that plus or minus. We're going to see a lot more of that as we continue to simplify these square roots. So remember, the square root of 25 over the square root of 9, or square root of 25 over the 9 is the same thing as the square root of 25 over the square root of 9. So x equals plus or minus I times 5 over 3. And remember, if we want to be polite, we're going to rewrite it in this form, 5/3 I. So our solutions are 5/3 I and negative 5/3 I. Now I'm going to do one more example that can have the potential to really cause you some heartache. And that's this. So we've got a problem like this. Say we've got x minus 2 quantity squared equals 6. Now later on we're going to do some other methods and you're going to say, oh look, I need to simplify this, so I'm going to say x squared, I'm going to do it off to the side over here, I'm going to say x minus 2 quantity squared equals 6, so that's the same thing as x minus 2 times x minus 2 equals 6, x squared minus 2x plus 4 equals 6, x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 6, x squared minus 4x minus 2 equals 0, and now I'm going to do my little thingy where blah 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 blah. Don't do that. This is the hard way to solve this problem. Don't solve it the hard way. It will make you cry. The more steps that you take, the more likely you are to do something ridiculous. And that's not a you thing, that's a person thing. The more steps it takes you to get to the answer, the more likely you're going to drop a negative or go, 3 times 2 is 5. I mean, we all do it. So look for the best way to solve these problems. And that's why I'm giving them to you in this very, very, very specific order. First step is factoring. Second step is, or second option is, square root method. Square root method is better than anything that's going to come after this because it's just a lot better. Remember now, when we talked about the square root method, we said that as long as we had something squared and a plain old number, we could do this. As long as we had something squared and a plain old number, this would work. So that's what we have here. Look, check it out. We have something squared and a plain old number. Now, it's x minus 2 squared, but I didn't care. I didn't tell you what it had to, that had to be something in particular. I said something squared. This is, in fact, something. X minus 2 qualifies as something. It's something squared equals a regular number. So I'm going to rewrite this so it's not all funky. So I have something squared equals a regular number. I can approach this just like I did all the other problems. I get the squared term by itself. It's already by itself. It's fantastic. It's right for the picking. The bully's by himself. Nobody's watching. This is where you go in and you take care of things. Okay? So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to take the square root of both sides and put my plus or minus out front. So remember that the square root of something squared is just something. The square root of something squared is that something. Okay. X minus 2 plus or minus the square root of 6. Okay? We're like practically done already. Practically done. And it's taken pretty much no time whatsoever compared to what was going on over here. Alright. So now we want to isolate the x, so we'll add 2 to both sides. Now I'm going to tell you, draw yourself a little arrow when you do this, because if you don't, what can happen is this. You might say, well, I do plus 2 over here and plus 2 over here, so this is going to be plus or minus the square root of 8. So somehow you're going to accidentally get that 2 mixed up with what's going on in the square root over here, and you don't want to do that. The 2 is completely independent of that plus or minus square root of 6. We're adding the plus 2 to both sides. So you might put a little arrow to indicate to yourself where that's going to go, just to prevent you from doing something silly. So now x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 6. So really your solutions are 2 plus the square root of 6 and 2 minus the square root of 6. And we're all done.